There is a lot of stigma towards drug users themselves and towards programs that help them. In our country, there is a view that if you use drugs, then you are a weak person. You do not have a disease, I don't know, you do not have a disorder, you are just a weak and immoral person, and so be it.
You're listening to Narcotica, a podcast giving you the straight dope about drugs and the people who use them.
The last place you'd want to be dependent on drugs, besides the Philippines, North Korea, or the United States, is probably Russia. To give just one example, the Motherland has long banned the use of medication-assisted treatment, such as buprenorphine or methadone, which has made recovery next to impossible for many users. Like many northern regions, Russia has a long history with alcoholism. But when the USSR went to war with Afghanistan in 1979, heroin came on the scene in a big way as returning soldiers brought opiates home with them. Meanwhile, authoritarian crackdowns on people who use drugs led to some notorious innovations, such as the drug crocodile, a nasty little bathtub variety of the opioid desomorphine that in some cases literally ate users alive. Due to some really garbage backyard synthesis, contaminants in the drug, including things like iodine and red phosphorus, caused the drug to become associated with amputations, ulceration, and scale-like skin, hence the name crocodile. This homemade injectable opioid has since given way to synthetic drugs like fentanyl and synthetic cannabinoids, much like those that have landed in the United States. Yet with its proximity to China, where many synthetic drugs are manufactured, the synthetic revolution in Russia could make the heroin haze of the 1980s and 90s pale in comparison. I'm Troy Farah, and you're listening to Narcotica. To discuss the challenges of conducting harm reduction in Russia, Narcotica co-host Christopher Moraff, our expert in Kensington, Pennsylvania, sat down with a special guest from St. Petersburg. Rather than mangle his name, I will let him introduce himself to you.
My name is Aleksey Lakhov. I am from St. Petersburg, Russia, and I am working in the oldest harm reduction program in Russia. It is called the charitable fund Humanitarian Action.
Thanks for being on the show. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about the state of harm reduction in Russia today?
As for the new HIV cases, the HIV rates have been stabilizing for the last couple of years, though those numbers are still huge. For example, in 2019, we had more than 80,000 new cases, and I think this is like an enormous figure. And in 2018, we had almost 100,000 cases. So basically, the rates are declining, but they are still huge, man. I mean, 80,000 new cases per year. I don't know, according to the official data of the Ministry of Health, we have about 900,000 people living with HIV, and according to other specialists, we have at least 1.3 million people living with HIV. So basically, approximately 300,000 people do not know their HIV status, and I think that this situation should be changed. Should change, otherwise we will have a full-blown epidemic.
So here in Pennsylvania, even, in the states, there's many states, counties, and in Pennsylvania, most of the state needle exchange is still illegal. Mm-hmm. Is needle exchange against the law in Russia?
Technically, it is not against the law, although we can always be prosecuted. For example, if our actions are deemed as propaganda, for example, as drug use propaganda. But we have several amendments to our criminal code that stipulate that needle exchange, it is like not a law violation. So basically, the substitution therapy is prohibited because methadone and buprenorphine are prohibited, but needle exchange is technically legal in our country.
Wow. One area where you're more progressive than most of the states. But naloxone distribution is only legally, as you said, if it's prescription-based. What we have here is called like an open prescription, whereas just about the policymakers have deemed it, reasonable to just say, Everyone gets an open prescription. You can go into a pharmacy and buy it if your family member is, using drugs or using opioids and you want to prevent overdoses. But that's not the case for you.
No, though, naloxone, it's at least our pharmacies, they understand what naloxone is for, and basically they just can sell it to you even if you do not have a prescription, for example. First, you need to find it, because not every pharmacy has it in stock. But if you manage to find it, then practically all the pharmacies would sell it to you, just because they understand that you can't use it for anything else but reversing overdose.
So you haven't encountered there the sort of reverse moral hazard argument that we have here, where there's an opposition to naloxone based on the fact that it makes people more reckless. Is that a conversation or a dialogue that comes up in your country?
Well, actually, I haven't heard such conversations, just because, the public talk about people who use drugs, it's very conservative and it's very rigid, in my opinion. So basically, the main line, so to speak, is that drug users should be either incarcerated or put into the rehab. And actually, not a week ago, one of our State Duma deputies, this is like a lawmaking body, proposed that people who use drugs, they should have a choice, basically. Either you are incarcerated, or if you do not want to receive treatment, then you are incarcerated as well. So basically, it's no choice for the drug user, and he wants to adopt this law. I hope it won't be adopted, but at least we have such talks right now. As for naloxone, it is not a commonly used, medication. And I think you should try to find any mentions in mass media or in, or in some blogs or on social media about naloxone, just because it is not widely used in Russia, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is used only by non-governmental organizations that provide people with naloxone, or by the paramedics that arrive if someone overdosed.
Yeah, that's been the biggest game changer here, is the open prescription, because prior to that it was just police officers or paramedics that were doing reversals, and now just about every drug user in Philadelphia has naloxone on them. But it's interesting that you're not so much more backward than we are, because we have low-ranking state lawmakers here that are proposing bills for involuntary commitment for drug users based on such arbitrary criteria as if you have more than 3 track marks on your arms. Now, fortunately, none of them have passed that I know of, but the rhetoric here is that we are treating drug users as people who have a disease, but they're still very much criminalized. I guess I would ask you, so, unlike America that has many states that have many laws, Russia is unified and under the Putin, may I say, regime. What would Vladimir Putin's, sort of official stance be on this? Would it be that there are no drug users in Russia, or what is it?
No, actually, he accepts that there is such a problem, and he publicly mentions it, but he doesn't want to change the anti-narcotics laws. So basically, he thinks that the current system, it's useful, it is not outdated, and so basically he doesn't want to change it. And so if he doesn't want to change it, then no other lawmaker would like to change it. So basically this is like, for us, it's a lose-lose situation, basically, just because you can put your suggestions, you can write official letters, and they will be reviewed, but nothing will come out of it, actually, just because the Kremlin doesn't want to change these laws. And so basically, you have correctly mentioned that we are like unified, and the political system, though it is similar to the one that you have, but I think our federal center is more influential than in your country.
So St. Peter couldn't just unilaterally choose of its own accord to legalize maintenance therapy. I mean, that would be challenged.
Yes, of course, it will be challenged just because we have a lot of different decrees, laws regulating this area. So basically, to try to adopt substitution therapy program in St. Petersburg, we would have to put a lot of efforts into it, and I still think that it should be decided at the highest level, not at the level of our city administration, but at the higher level.
I can understand why. I mean, I live in a state where needle exchange is legal within Philadelphia County, but as soon as you get outside of it, it's not. And, marijuana is decriminalized in Philadelphia County, but if you're unlucky enough to be across the street on the other side of the county, you could go to jail. So how about buprenorphine? Is that discussed at all? Do most people know what that is?
Yes, people know what that is, but it's still illegal. We have several narcotic substances, and methadone is in the list number 1, and buprenorphine is in the list number 2. So they are illegal.
But you have doctors, say, that are more progressive, that are willing to take a radical stance on this and treat, even though it's against the law, or are doctors conservative as well?
But if it is prohibited, then you can go to jail if you start treating with it. So, of course, we have quite a lot of progressive doctors, actually, who publicly state that we need such treatment, but they can do nothing about it. They can just talk about it, actually. And if they try to implement any such thing, then they just can go to jail.
Let's talk about the flip side of this, and that would be the prescription pain medication. America consumes more prescription pain medication, I think, alone than the rest of the world. Have pain patients, people that are prescribed opioids for their chronic pain or acute pain, have they faced the blowback that sort of they have in our country from, the stigmatization of mood-altering recreational drugs?
Yes, of course. The main painkiller, for example, for patients with oncology, it's morphine. And of course, when the laws became strict in regards to prescribing morphine and so forth, so the doctors, they just started to delay prescribing people with morphine to ease their pain. And so basically people just started to commit suicides because they just couldn't bear this pain. And actually there was a public outcry when a prominent Russian admiral, I think from the Russian Navy, he just committed suicide, and he wrote in his suicide note that he just couldn't stand this pain anymore, and nobody could provide him with morphine. And so basically that was the reason why he committed suicide. And we had several such cases. And only after that, the laws were eased a little bit. And now people who are on palliative care, they can be prescribed with morphine or with these plasters. I don't know for sure what they contain. Maybe I doubt it is fentanyl, but maybe these are morphine plasters as well. So basically now the situation has changed for the better, but still just several years ago it was really horrible. So because doctors were afraid that if they lose, for example, 1 unit of morphine, then they can be jailed, or then can be persecuted, or then they can be fined. And it really was a problem.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was at UNGAS in the UN meeting last in New York. There was some signatories to a paper that called for the death penalty for drug dealers. Do drug dealers face the death penalty in Russia currently?
No, we do not have death penalty at all. So basically, the maximum prison term is life sentence, and the maximum prison term for drug selling is 20 years, I believe.
Russia does not have the death penalty?
Yes.
And in the U.S., we still do. I'd like everybody to just rethink that for a second. Let that sink in. Prior to talking, we discussed a bit about the evolution of drug use and the types of drugs that are being abused currently in St. Petersburg. First of all, why don't you describe the population you deal with? In Philadelphia, the population I'm accustomed to, being around and reporting the most on are mostly homeless people that are at the worst of their bottom, and much of it is caused by the policies that we have, of course, more than the drugs themselves. Is there a high population of homeless drug addicts, and are there functional drug users, as we would call them here?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I was in the USA several years ago, in 2017, and we visited several states and different programs. And actually, I saw the difference between people who use drugs in our country and people in your country and in Canada as well, because I saw by myself several harm reduction programs in Canada as well, in Toronto area. And so I can compare it to the situation that we have here in Russia, at least in St. Petersburg. And I think that the majority of people who use drugs here, they are functional drug users, so to speak. So they have a home, I don't know, some of them have work, so they receive welfare, they are on welfare. Mm-hmm. But as for the homeless population, actually, I think that there were no surveys, no research on this topic, but according to our observation, not a lot of homeless people use drugs, actually. And if they do use anything, they just drink alcohol, more alcoholics, so to speak.
Of course, alcohol, we consider a drug. And I'd like to step back to when there was a high rate of deaths due to sort of like adulterated vodka. If I don't know how long ago this was, but no, I imagine Russia is awash in vodka. But why were people dying from it?
Yes, we did have adulterated vodka and some other liquors, and I believe this problem is still not solved. But at least for the last couple of years, there haven't been so many reports on deaths from the adulterated alcohol or some other things. So basically, I think that maybe ethanol became cleaner or something like that.
Was it a function of just businessmen sort of just make and label whatever they wanted? I mean, and sell it cheaper? Was it an issue of cost primarily?
I think yes, and though the cost of alcohol is steadily increasing in our country, and it is the government decision to increase the prices, so to discourage people from using alcohol. And actually these measures bear fruit, because according to the latest statistics, I believe that less and less people in Russia drink alcohol, actually. And so basically this is like a great achievement, in my opinion, because I believe that less and less people will die from adulterated alcohol or something like that. Although, of course, people who do not have money, they will still buy these adulterated liquors, and of course they will still die from it. And this problem is far from over.
So you've seen a spike in novel psychoactive substances much in the way we have here, and yet you are very close to one of the largest growing regions of opium poppy. One of the mythologies of people that aren't educated on this topic in America is that we get a lot of heroin from Afghanistan, and that's actually not true. Most of that goes to Europe, and I had assumed places like Iran, which ironically has a fairly progressive stance on addiction treatment, and Russia. But are you seeing a decline in heroin, organic heroin from poppy, and an increase in novel psychoactive substances?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. I don't know what is the reason for this, but actually we saw a huge decline in heroin use all over Russia. and maybe it was connected to, I don't know, to the work that the federal service, it has been, this service has been disbanded actually, but when it was working, one of its greatest achievements was to stop heroin traffic in Russia.
So it was interdiction based, basically, to interdict heroin coming across the border from Afghanistan.
Yeah, maybe from Afghanistan, from Tajikistan, from Uzbekistan, from the Central Asian republics where we received this heroin from. But we still have the problem with methadone, synthetic methadone that is injected as well. And this is one of the biggest problems for St. Petersburg, for example, because we have a lot of laboratories in the nearby region, in the Leningrad Oblast, it is called. And this methadone is being produced there, and it is shipped not only into St. Petersburg, but also to other regions of Russia as well.
It's very interesting. So you have a black market for methadone that's illicitly produced. And I would say the only benefit of that would be that it's long-acting, whereas here the fentanyl, as it came into Philadelphia, we've seen people getting sick very short term, having to reuse. So you would say that black market methadone is an issue right now.
Yes, this is an issue right now, and also we have huge issues with different substances, such as new psychoactive substances, such as methadone, such as bath salts like MDPV or alpha PVP, or synthetic cannabinoids. I don't know, and also we have a lot of people who use hashish or marijuana. A lot of people who use MDMA and amphetamine. And as for St. Petersburg, this is basically, I don't know, the capital of synthetic stimulants right now.
So you have more of a party city kind of than I mean, it sounds like those are the types of drugs people use to go out to the clubs. Describe St. Petersburg to me. Is it a cosmopolitan city? Is it a city where there are a lot of nightlife, that kind of thing?
Yes, I would describe it as a cosmopolitan city. We have a lot of different nightclubs and a lot of nice parties. But by synthetic stimulants, I meant these salts, because of course we have people who use amphetamines, we have people who use MDMA, but mainly more and more young people aged 18 to 25, or even 16 to 25 to 30, they use methadone, they use these alpha PVP and BPV, and these drugs, it turns out to be that they are addictive after all, and people just, at first they start snorting these drugs, then they start injecting, of course, they start overdosing, and basically this is a huge problem right now.
So are you able to carry naloxone yourself, and have you been able to use it to reverse overdoses?
No, actually not once in my life. I used it on someone else, but we provide naloxone on our mobile units, and so people, they just thank us for that, because when they go back to their apartments and where they use drugs, they can reverse this overdose. And of course there were a lot of positive feedback on this, because people really saved lives.
So what is the average age of the the opioid user in St. Petersburg? We found that with the increase in overdoses, there's been a sort of a trend away from opioids for the younger people that may be turning towards stimulants. But there's still a population of older users that are have been out there for a long time, that are finding themselves now addicted to fentanyl and fentanyl analogs. And is a similar thing occurring there?
Yes, actually there is a similar thing occurring in St. Petersburg and in a lot of other regions of Russia, because the average age of our clients who use methadone, for example, is 37 years. So basically, these are people who started using when they were in their 20s, in their teens, and so they just keep on using since that time. And as for the younger generation, they use stimulants mainly.
Now, would you say that the methadone use may be a form of self-maintenance, or is it abuse in your eyes?
Yes, I got your point. And when we had a lot of heroin, methadone was considered to be, I don't know, like a drug, like a medication that you can really use to withdraw from heroin. But when heroin disappeared, people started to abuse methadone, and now they have a methadone dependency, and it's really horrible as well, because actually it's harder to kick off the methadone habit.
Mm-hmm. So here in the States, there's a sort of a split in the harm reduction community. There are, one side takes the stance of, we meet people where they are, and our job is to reduce the harm of drug use, not with the end goal necessarily of getting somebody off drugs. And then there's another side where it's sort of like harm reduction should have an ultimate goal of abstinence. And it sounds like, from the way I hear you describing maybe your stance or the stance of most Russians, abstinence is the ultimate goal. Would you say that's the dominant view, even among people who describe themselves as being in the harm reduction community?
It's an interesting question, because we do not have that many harm reduction programs left. And practically we are still trying to implement this use that the abstinence is not the ultimate goal. And so basically that we should meet people where they are. But the dominant view is that the ultimate goal of any interventions, of any rehabs, should be the total and complete abstinence.
Assuming you were of, adult age during the time of communism, as I was it better or worse in terms of the rates of overdose, the options available to people who were addicted, or people who use drugs, or people who abuse drugs? Because I think there's lots of people that use drugs that do not meet the criteria of addiction. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, we have a DSM-5 here that spells out a very specific range of factors that make up substance abuse disorder. So what has, assuming and you're old enough to remember, what has changed, and has it changed for the worse?
Well, actually, I'm 39 years old, so
You were there. You were there when the wall came down. Yeah.
I caught some Soviet Union. I was born in the Soviet Union, but the situation has drastically changed after the Afghan war, because actually it was like a trigger for Afghan heroin that started to come into Russia. And the 90s, they were really horrible. So basically we were not the Soviet Union anymore. We became like Russia, the Russian Federation. But since that time, a lot of different drugs has come into our country, because before that there was just, there were these poppies, and people just used these poppy substance. I forgot what name is in English. It was a self-made.
Like a poppy tea or something.
Yeah. Poppy tea, right? And so basically it was like a self-made drug, and there were drug users, of course, during the Soviet Union, but there were not a lot of them. Not like after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Afghan war.
It sounds like what happened very similarly here in Vietnam during our Vietnam War. Did you have a lot of GI? We call them GIs, but a lot of your troops coming back from Afghanistan with opioid dependencies?
Yes, of course, we had such troops, but I believe there were not a lot of them. Maybe not so many as in the States, for example. But I think that the Afghan war, it was like start, I don't know, when people saw that they could export heroin to Russia and do it quite freely, and just because, these routes started to appear, and because the border service was practically non-existent after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so basically people were very poor, I don't know. And when a lot of cheap heroin appeared, I just remember these times because you could practically buy it, I don't know, on the streets. It's unimaginable now. Now you have to, I don't know, now you have to try to find drugs because almost all of the deals, they are carried out via darknet, via different messengers. And so basically the sellers do not see their buyers anymore. And in the 90s, it was really horrible. It seems like everybody was selling drugs.
That's interesting. So there's not street dealing or even phone dealing. It's dark web. And there's been some evidence that when consumers can sort of vet online sellers, that it could reduce overdoses. There's been some papers, academic papers to that effect. But then I guess it depends on how scrupulous and how, the range of services and competition available. But you would say that the dark web has taken over the Russian drug selling market for the most part.
Yes, definitely. And actually, the largest drug selling platform, it is called Hydra. They have their own, I don't know how to better call it, drug addiction service, where they describe how you can not to overdose, how you can keep your health, so forth. So basically, they have a whole service, and they have real doctors on their staff who...
They do? Wow.
Yeah, who consult clients, who consult buyers on how to reduce harm, on how to prevent HIV, and so forth.
I think that's a really important point to make. So we'll make sure to link to your paper on that you had sent me.
Thank you.
And I guess I would just ask, so how do people find you? They have to proactively look for you on your services. And do you find that there's a stigma perhaps against using services like that, that sort of like stymies your work a bit?
Yes, of course, there is stigma, and there is a lot of stigma towards drug users themselves and towards programs that help them. Because in our country, there is a view that if you use drugs, then you are a weak person. You do not have a disease, I don't know, you do not have a disorder, you are just a weak and immoral person, and so be it. So basically, and of course, people find us mainly via social media, via our website, via different messengers, such as Telegram, for example, because though it is technically blocked in Russia, but still I believe this is the third most used messenger in our country. This is a really paradoxical situation, but it is what it is. And we have several chats for our clients. We have a Telegram channel, and we attract people to our services via these means of communication.
Well, Aleksey, thanks for joining us today for this discussion. Is there anything you'd like to add that I may have missed that our listeners should know?
I don't know. Actually, the last words that I would like to share with you is we are really similar. I mean, our countries are very similar. We are like two sides of one coin, and I saw it myself when I went to the States several years ago, and I was really amazed by how, I don't know, how our politicians talk a lot about different things and about each other, and how usual people, I don't know, so-called average citizens, they do not listen to politicians, and they just talk to each other. I mean, we had a lot of positive experiences in the States, And so a lot of people, when they found out that we were from Russia, they were like, wow, it's great. And the same is here in Russia to people who come from America, actually. So it's like, I believe it's like it should be a motto. You should never listen to politicians, and you should listen to, I don't know, your average people.
Your peers, yes. And I think a lot of our listeners will be surprised to know that Russia has no death penalty and that needle exchange is legal all over that vast, massive land of yours when we can't even go outside of our county. And I think that's a lesson, that's an important takeaway from this conversation. So thanks again for being on the show, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for listening to Narcotica. You can follow us on Twitter at Narcocast. We're also on other social medias like Facebook and YouTube. Narcotica is an independent production by Christopher Moraff, Zachary, Siegel, and Troy Farah. Our theme music is by Glassboy, additional music is by Poddington Bear, and I'm your co-producer, Garrett. If you're a fan of our show and like what we do here, consider supporting us on Patreon. There's a lot of really good places to take your money right now, like the ACLU, NAACP, Doctors Without Borders. And so that's why we really appreciate the people who choose to support us on Patreon. Thank you for helping keep this show free from corporate influence. Give us a follow where you get your podcasts. We're on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, you name it. And be sure to have a very nice night.